Good evening, everyone. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Law of New Jersey, notice of this November 17th, 2020 meeting of the Bridgewater Raritan Regional Board of Education was posted electronically on the district website and provided on November 13th, 2020 by sending a 48-hour written notice to the Courier News, Star Ledger, Bridgewater Township Clerk, Raritan Borough Clerk, and by posting on the bulletin board in the Harmon V. Wade Administration Building. As this is a virtual meeting, those unable to access the meeting via the internet are able to listen in by dialing into the conference line 712-432-6514 and conference pin 555548. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Miss Lee?
Here.
Mrs. Mead?
Here.
Mr. Malik? Here. Mr. Singer?
Here.
Mrs. Hurley? Mrs. Hurley? Gotta unmute.
Sorry, here.
Mr. Joshi?
Present.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mrs. Gladstone?
Here.
Mrs. Barlow?
Here. We are now up to item 5 for the board retreat, and we will have discussion on the BOE self-evaluation as well as the action plan regarding our board goals. And that discussion will be led by Glenn Thornton from the New Jersey School Board Association Field Service Representative. And so I'll go ahead and turn it over.
Is anybody else getting that?
Yes. So if people could mute, I think that's better.
Okay.
So Mrs. Thornton, if you could please take it from here.
I certainly will. Is the PowerPoint loaded that it could be put up, Peter? Thank you. So good evening. It is a pleasure to see all of you. If we are still in boxes, it is lovely to be back and to see all of you. So if you can move to the next slide. Our agenda tonight really was just to review your board self-evaluation and talk about developing action plans for the board goals that we set a little bit a while ago, and then just to wrap up and moving forward into 2021 and the kinds of things that you'll be thinking about and looking forward to. So you received via email from Jackie an electronic copy of the self-evaluation. And when I look through it, I have to commend all of you. The next slide, please. I actually believe that the self-evaluation is valuable for boards in that in looking backward, you can help the board move forward. It's designed to help you look at what you do as an individual board member, but more importantly, to look at how you function as a board in the 9 critical areas of your responsibility. And so I have a couple of charts, if you can go to the next slide. And the first one is really looking at those 2 divergent pieces. This chart looks at the yellow. You can see that is how you individually rated your individual performance in each area. And the blue is how you rated the board. And no surprise, you can see that in most areas, you rated your individual board performance better than you rated the performance of the board. That's not unusual at all. I have some boards that do that in every single area. It goes to, I know what I'm doing, the other 8 of you haven't a clue. And I say that in jest, but you did, in fact, indeed, in some areas indicate that the board's performance was better than your individual performance. And that's typical there in the area you can see of finance, in the area of board staff relationships, and also almost equal in the area of student achievement. So where there's a great divergence, it generally says that there might be additional work and professional development that you might consider in a particular area. And the area where there was the greatest divergence were in two different areas. That would be planning and the board and the community. I think that's not extraordinarily unusual for any board this year. I think planning became secondary to figuring out how to open schools in the pandemic. And so certainly, additionally, you also transitioned to an interim superintendent with the resignation of your permanent superintendent. So obviously there are some things that took a little bit of a back seat, and planning is an area where, you know, moving forward, those are things that you may want to think about. Hopefully we'll be back at least to a new normal. I'm crossing my fingers and toes for the 2021 school year, although I'm not sure we'll make it quite in September, but hopefully thereafter, back to a new normal. And I think you need to continue to think about planning, long-term planning, in spite of the fact that we are living through these extraordinary challenging times, because life is going to continue after the pandemic is gone. So I think that's an important piece to keep in mind. Next slide, please. The next slide is a year-over-year look, and I think that's always very helpful to look at for all of you. And certainly this just compares 2019 and 2020. And you went up in numerous areas in policy, in board superintendent relationships, your board staff relationships. You held absolutely even with the board and the community, which is interesting because you did identify that as being a continuing ongoing need. So sometimes, you know, when you look, while you don't give yourself any better scores this year than you gave yourself last year, and they're good, there's nothing wrong with them. It is an area where there's a continuing need to do some work. But I think that that's true for every board across the state. Particularly this year, is it's just been so challenging for parents and community members, board members, but particularly educators and administrators because of the need to have that ongoing communication. You're also, of course, hands are somewhat tied because districts can no longer have an administrator or an employee that is solely responsible for that communication piece because of the accountability regulations that were reauthorized in 2017. And so it's very difficult. Someone commented your lowest scores that you gave the board was in the area of not having a communications plan in place. Well, it's very difficult given all of the demands on administrative time when you don't have someone who's not sole responsibility, but at least part-time responsibility is those overall communications. And with the advent and the not excessive, but increased usage of social media, which is important, obviously for boards and for parents especially, and students, because that's how they like to receive information, it becomes increasingly more challenging to have that and have it working. So that may be something that you want to think moving forward about how you do that. And if there's someone who could potentially take that on in a part-time capacity, along with some other responsibilities, which is how a number of districts have addressed it, rather than having someone solely devoted to that. Overall, your scores were really very good. Clearly, you show improvement year over year. And I think that it's helpful for boards to take the time and do the analysis to say, what did we do well and what could we do better? But I think that you overall are making great progress as a board. So I thought it would just be helpful, next slide, to take a moment just to quickly review the 4 functions of a Board of Education, because one of the pieces that you have as a goal is around identifying roles and responsibilities of the board members And so really providing guidance through policy. And one of the areas that you had some concerns in was around policy. You have Strauss-Esme doing your policy. You've had to adopt several new policies this particular year having to do with COVID. And that's an area that is monitored through CUSAC. So it is important to continue to ensure that your policies are regularly updated. But regulations are the responsibility of your administration for implementation of those policies. And you depend upon your administration to develop regulations with fidelity to the policy. Secondarily, you're responsible overall for ensuring quality instruction. That's through planning. Also in that planning piece is your budgeting and finance. That was another area where you identified in your self-eval that a lot of you felt that you perhaps needed some additional updating or perhaps greater understanding of the financial reports that you receive. I wanted to point out to you that just today the governor signed a law that is allowing for an extension of the annual audit to July. I wish it were July, to January 31st, 2021, which will give districts some additional time. There's also a bill pending for CUSAC relief, such that districts will be freed up. If you've been declared a high performing and you're due for CUSAC this year, you will be delayed 2 years. If that's not the case, you would be delayed 1 year. So those are the kinds of things that go into the finance piece, is around budgeting. That's something that a lot of boards will be working on, because keep in mind, every year that you're on the board, you're working with 3 sets of numbers. You have the audit going on of last year's budget, you have the current operating budget, and I know that your administration, I'm sure already has been working on developing a budget for the following school year. So those are all your planning pieces. Your appraisal piece really has to do with evaluating your one employee, which is your superintendent, and making sure that the district is being well run while you're not running it. While you're providing that oversight piece, while you're developing policies that provide a framework for the operation of the district, and while you are providing your last function, which is that two-way communication with your community. And so I thought it was just helpful just to take a moment and to talk about those just briefly, because I think boards struggle and have struggled mightily over time with understanding what is the difference between their role and the role of the superintendent. So understanding that individually you have no authority except when you're seated at a regularly advertised meeting of the board, as you are tonight. Understanding that a majority of the board makes decisions that has your district move forward is also critically important. So I just wanted to take a moment just to review that briefly with all of you, because I think it's helpful as a reminder as you start a new board year, because in another couple of weeks, believe it or not, we will be into the next board year with reorganization. And I'd also like to take an opportunity to thank both Anne Marie and Zach, although I can't see you right now on the screen, for your service to the students in Bridgewater Raritan and in the state through your work. We will miss you, but thank you very much for your service. Every board needs good board members, so thank you very much for that. The next slide. Just the 3 realities of governance. Last night we did a program called the 3 R's, which is roles, responsibilities, and resources for new board members. And I like this slide because, you know, you're elected as an individual, but you must govern as a member of the team. And so collectively you succeed, and individually you have no authority, right? So it's important to work forward as you develop a new team with new folks coming on board, to understand that, you know, you may have promised someone the world when you're a candidate, but those of you who've been on the board for a while know that no agenda that you may have individually is going to be successful without developing relationships and getting your colleagues on board. And I think that that's an important piece to understand. And lastly, that the public judges the success of your board, not by individual accomplishments necessarily, but by the collective. And so it's important to work together as a board, and taking the time to do your self-evaluation is helpful in ensuring that the board is looking at what you do well and what you may need to do some additional work on. And we worked on developing board goals. Next slide. For the 2021 school year. And as you know, it's the basis for improving your governance, effective communication of the board, holding itself accountable, and really in building that cohesive team that you need to be successful. Next slide, please. So here are the goals that you developed. Engaging in professional development to work toward the elimination of inherent biases, promote equity and inclusion. I'm not going to read them all. Developing an in-district onboarding process for new folks, finalizing the standardization of the committee reports to provide sufficient details, topics discussed, and so forth. That is a carryover from the preceding school year, one you wanted to carry forward. And the last one was to develop a greater understanding of the roles and responsibilities of a board member. So that's why I want to just take a moment at the beginning to just emphasize the 4 functions of a board, because that last board goal really does hone in on those particular functions. So you had asked about developing action plans. As you know, your superintendent and your administrative team develop action plans to move the district goals forward. The board is responsible for developing action plans to move the board goals forward. So next slide, I took the liberty of taking one of your goals and beginning to put together to show you what this would look like. And again, it's around your professional development, working on the elimination of inherent bias. So we had talked about, and one of the major activities would be a workshop on educational equity. And I will tell you that this legislature, and not the legislature, excuse me, the State Board of Ed is looking at adding equity pieces to the New Jersey student learning standards. And I expect to see that those will probably be adopted. So you are right on target with really looking at this point in time. The board and staff would be involved, would be the board and the superintendent. Resources in this instance would be New Jersey school boards. Timelines, I just put to be determined because I didn't want to presume any particular timeline given how busy you all are. And then an indicator of success, well, completion of the workshop and having a greater understanding. We talked about having one that was a little more in depth, a workshop in inherent bias. Again, through New Jersey school boards doing that presentation. And then the next step in the process would really be to begin reviewing your policies to reduce and eliminate, hopefully not just reduce, but to eliminate inequities that you find that your policy may embody, so that you're systemically eliminating any kind of disparate outcomes by virtue of having policies that do not provide for equitable access to resources. Because that's really what inequity does. It creates disparate outcomes. So again, you know, that would be the work of the policy committee and the superintendent to do that. And again, you know, the resources necessary, administrative time, board member time, committee time, there's no real cost to it. And again, a timeline is to be determined. I think you probably could put in there from January to, you know, looking at the end of the school year in June. Excuse me. And how would you know you were successful? You would look at all of the policies that you had reviewed and then look at any of those revisions that you identified that were necessary that you would then adopt. So you can add additional steps to this action plan, but I wanted to give you some sense of what would be included in an action plan for a board goal and what that would look like. And so I did it for one. Next slide, please. This one was an in-district onboarding process. And again, I was just trying to give you some ideas for moving it forward. One of the major activities would be an in-district orientation. One of the beauties of having a November election and a January reorganization is you have that interregnum, the period between two reigns. I know it's not a reign of a board, but I love the word. And I used to teach world culture, so I love to say interregnum. You have that time frame that allows you to really onboard folks appropriately and to help them get comfortable with what's going to be expected of them and help them to really do that. So the people typically involved would be the superintendent, your business administrator, and the board president, because at a minimum, we would suggest that every new board member, or if you have three new board members this year, you have two board members meet with the superintendent, meet with the business administrator for an overview of the budget and that kind of piece for your business administrator and the financial end of the district, to talk with your superintendent about the educational aspects of the district, and then to meet with the board president to talk about the nuts and bolts of how the board operates. And again, make sure that they have all of the materials that they need and, develop those. So I used to say 3 hours, 3 documents, 3 people, the board president, the superintendent, the BA, access, because in the old days, policy manuals used to be in notebooks this big. Now that's online, which is wonderful. So they have access to that. But to show them where it's located on your website, to show them how to access it, to help them understand what the system is in terms of policy arrangement, and then to give and compile for them in a folder a year's worth of board minutes so that they understand where you are right now, especially if they haven't necessarily been attending board meetings for the last year. By looking back for a brand new person for a full year helps them to understand what you will currently be engaged in. By looking back, they can look forward. So again, that's something that you might want to think about as an in-district orientation process for them. And then perhaps also providing links to all kinds of materials that we have around board roles and responsibilities, the code of ethics, all of those kinds of things that we certainly can share with you. And again, it's just time and materials. And I had suggested you have that ready by November of 2021, so that when you hold the next election, you will be prepared to onboard these folks. Hopefully you will be able to do it in person and not remotely. How will you know you've been successful? Well, the utilization of all of those materials by your new folks. You will see that they come on being more informed and more comfortable. When I was a brand new board member, I remember meeting for the very first time in the high school library and feeling like a deer in the headlights. Because even though I had been attending meetings and been active in the district and the PTO and the PTA, it was just new. The view from the dais is a lot different than the view from sitting in the audience. And I think all of you who are board members would agree to that. You may want to consider using mentors. Some districts do that as another way. And again, the resources, board members have to agree to mentor a new person. It's just time. And that would happen between January and June, really just to give someone about 6 months worth of time to be a resource to your new people. And again, you could do an assessment from the new members as to the value of the mentorship. Was it helpful? Was it not helpful? Was it valuable? Was it not valuable? But again, those are all the kinds of activities that you can implement to begin to put into place an onboarding process. A little more difficult in a remote environment that we're in currently, but nonetheless, it can be done. And so those are the kinds of things that you may want to think about putting in your action plans. It doesn't have to be terribly complicated. It doesn't have to have financial implications and be costly. I don't think any of your goals are costly to the district in any way, shape, or form. They don't require outside professional development unless you want to do that. But again, it just depends on how you want to address those. So does that help in terms of understanding the kinds of pieces that go into an action plan? Yes, you can nod your heads, yes. Comments, thoughts. These were not meant to be inclusive or directive, but rather just to provide you with some suggestions so that it would be clearer.
Gwen, was someone else going to talk? To me, this is very beneficial. And Gwen, should we be talking through the action plans right now so that we can come up with those plans?
You can, if you choose to do that. Certainly, I can send you, I don't think I included the other ones. I may have. Another slide. I don't know that I included all 4. Oh, I did. I included action plans for you, blanks, so that you could, if you wanted, print them and then you would have them. We certainly can talk through those. I just didn't all of that, figuring that you might do that in committee, or I wasn't sure how you wanted to proceed with that, Jackie. So
what are people's feelings? Because I think we need to discuss these probably as a full board. Do people want to come up with the plans? Because I think Gwen has given us an excellent start on 2 of them.
Well, there's no time like the present.
Okay. And anyone object to going through them right now? Okay, then let's go with Lynn's suggestion that there's no time like the present.
okay, can we go back a slide? Because we're now at the 4th one, I think. There we go.
Yeah.
That's the 3rd one. So we'll start there to make it a little easier. I know you had worked on this past year. I don't know what you exactly did, or what you think still needs to be done.
Well, I think that I'm going to speak from my perspective that I think the board goals kind of got lost in everything that we were doing last year with the pandemic. So I think we're really starting fresh here. I don't know what others think. I'm going to take silence as golden. And
I'm just muted. I agree with you, Jackie.
I'm going to just throw out one suggestion, and that would be that after the committee reports each month, maybe for 3 or 4 months, that we go around and say, was it effective or not? What could we do differently? So we're doing it in real time as we're hearing the reports. But if people have other suggestions, Jill?
Maybe just sort of asking you could ask board members to email you and the chair of a committee what they would like to see improved in the minutes or the committee reports. You know, if they, some direct feedback before and during. I know you said after, but even before we start the new board year. You know?
Okay, so right now, do people regularly review the minutes? Because I know when I was chair of some committees, I always got the minutes ahead of time and I would go through them. I may not have done the best job, but I did get them and go through them.
So I've done it in my capacity as academic chairman. I would go through the minutes before the meetings, but depending on the situation, I might, but normally I wouldn't go over the meeting minutes of other committees because I would hear those minutes in the meeting, and then if there were any questions, I would ask it.
Okay.
So, but I really like Jill's idea. I think, at least from my perspective, I felt that I thought there was improvement in terms of the academic committee meeting minutes, but sporadically in meetings, I would hear other board members saying that they thought that the minutes needed more, but I was always unsure of what exactly they meant was needed. So I think just having that direct feedback is necessary.
We're getting, at least I'm hearing a lot of feedback, Zach, when you talk.
I think someone has the YouTube video on the computer, and when it's playing, it's coming through the speaker. Thank you, Gwen.
Yeah, that was a big help. I'm really sorry, Zach. Could you try saying it one more time?
Yeah, so I was essentially just saying that I agree with Jill. I think at times I didn't really know what direction other board members wanted the meeting minutes to go, like to lead toward. So I think just having like someone say like little comments here and there, I think would be very helpful.
Okay, so Jill, your suggestion is to make sure that the committee chair and you said the board president review the minutes prior to them going out, or?
No, they do already. I mean, part of the chair, I mean, the committee, there's a chair of the committee and they're the board member in charge of the committee with the respective administrator who's in charge and writes the minutes. But I think it's probably in our policy that the chair reviews the draft.
Okay.
And before it goes to the rest of the committee members and to the rest of the full board. Now, in my many years, 14 years or whatever on the board, and different administrators coming and going, there's a difference. Some minutes of the committees are really full of detail where board members really get, everything is clear. And there are other committee minutes where it's very sparse. It's just, we discussed this and there were no recommendations without any more meat and potatoes about the discussion.
Okay.
But so I'd like to see more. I think we carried forward this goal. We all felt it was important to carry through because we want the details. So what I'm saying is going forward, if anybody has comments on how minutes are now, send them to the chair and the administrator and the board president to try to get to see if there's any particular committee that needs to get improved or more details. And then
Okay. Is it reasonable to ask which committee has exemplary minutes that we should model or no?
I don't know if I would put that out there right now.
Okay, that's fine. So that's a good suggestion. And Lynn, I want to go back to you because I know you had really raised this concern, to begin with. That's how it became a board goal, if I recall correctly. So do you have additional thoughts on what action plan we should put in place?
Well, my original thought, when I brought it up last year, I think my main point was we were just being read to off a sheet of paper, which we had already received. And I was hoping that the whole committee report would just become more conversational in general, rather than reading a report.
Right.
Action plan wise, I don't know. I don't want to say someone who's uncomfortable just speaking off the cuff not to read, but I think if we weren't reading and we were talking like, oh, hey, we talked about, buying widgets or whatever, and then discuss that rather than reading it off the piece of paper, maybe more would come out in conversation and people would be more engaged.
I agree with you, but one thing is that when we have like the past meeting, I think it was FFT or was it curriculum? I think the meeting was 3 hours long, right? So it would be difficult for the committee chair or the administrator, whoever is writing this up, to put 3 hours plus worth
Well,
of.
I don't think they need to write 3 hours worth of stuff. That's my point. I mean, curriculum's always been 3 hours long. But
Right.
my point is, if there was a robust discussion on a textbook, hey, we had a very lively discussion about this textbook. Some of us felt this, some of us felt that, open it up for more questions, something like that, and get the entire board engaged, because we all should know. I mean, I realize we have committees to keep our workload less, but we all should have a really good understanding of everything that's going on in each committee. So it's not about writing and typing and reading what happened for 3 hours. It's about discussing what's most germane, if that
So
makes
we
sense.
may have come to a conclusion on something, but there may have been a lot of discussion and debate about it. And it would be good for the board to know what were the kinds of things we were wrestling with.
Thank you, Jackie. You said it much better than I did.
No, you did. I was able to say because of what you said. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we?
Jack, can I add something else? Jackie?
Sure.
I'm thinking of, I have an idea. Instead of just reading, let's say there's 10 topic agenda items. So we talked about this. We talked about the second, we talked about the third. How about after each one, the committee chair takes a break, looks around and says, does anybody have any questions, or would anybody like more information? And then they go to the next one. So it's not just like a monotone reading, boom, 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 boom. It might just to slow it down, one topic at a time, so, like we just like Lynn's, we've discussed buying, 50,000 widgets, and we got information from these vendors before going on to the next, just take a breath, look around. Does any, and maybe that'll jog the memory of the other committee members. Yeah, we really were concerned, or whatever, that might, just slowing it down and separating each item as a separate little chunk might make it more conversational. But I do think it's important to have the details in that document. That's
okay. Anne Marie, were you raising your hand before?
Yeah, I think that I think I agree with what Jill said, and Lynn used the word communication. And I think it's very difficult to put a document out there thinking that everybody's going to absorb from something that's being read. Mm-hmm. And I also think that communication is two ways. So if Barry's the committee chair of FFT, and so I'm talking about the committee that I'm on, and he writes a report, then if we're not getting enough, then we have to say it. And I think that's what Jill was getting to. We have to say it at the meeting, and we have to be more willing to talk and have conversations in public amongst the 9 of us. And I think that's really part of the challenge. And then the other thing I just thought of, I don't know why, is what are the 3 main things that came out of that, and just make sure, of that particular meeting, and just make sure that they're addressed. But it's hard to communicate the same thing to 9, 10, and then everybody in the public the same way. So it's never going to be a very robust or a whole solution, just as you think about this.
Okay.
Well, it also comes in that discussion, part of it, I usually do review the minutes before the meeting. So when they are reading it, and oftentimes maybe not be appropriate, but I do interrupt to ask the questions during the time frame. Sometimes it's about preparation too. So if the materials are all there in the meeting minutes and agenda and stuff, it's our responsibility, I feel, to look at it before we get to the meeting and be informed so that we know what's going on. And, and sometimes my reports have been Spartan. At times I've asked for questions and heard crickets. So I also, we need to be prepared when we come to the meetings to have those conversations and address subjects and areas that we want more information on. And that can also be done at the meeting, or we could add to it if you have a question over, when everything is posted, we can put them forward ahead of time to be prepared for them, both the administrator and the committee. So it's a twofold. Yes, I've been trying to embellish and add more to the FFT reports, but also sometimes those questions engaged, and the committee is part of that process also. They can help add to the chairman is held to report it out, but we're all held accountable, held to be responsible for what happens in that meeting. The chairman basically moderates the meeting and narrates the minutes, but we're all board members in that meeting and have the same responsibility.
But that's why I like Jill's idea.
Yeah, I'm not.
And sometimes there will be no questions. Very often it's very cut and dry. But we need to take that breath, like Jill said, and make sure,
Okay, so it sounds like what Jill suggested should be added as an action plan item. Is that sufficient right now, or do we need to add other things? Or do we want to see how that goes and we can revisit the action plan?
The only thing that I want to add is the first 3 words are finalize the standardization. And I just took a look at the different committee minutes, and FFT and personnel have a defined format that has the what was discussed and the recommendation, and the topic, what was discussed, recommendation. I think we need to adopt that throughout. I love that. I will praise others particular minutes. Like Zach's minutes are always incredibly detailed, and I appreciate that because I'm not at that meeting. But
That's
when
because of Karen.
okay, Karen's minutes are incredibly detailed, and I'm not surprised now hearing that's Karen. That you get a sense of what the discussion was. There are other minutes that aren't quite so detailed in that, but at the very least, we need the topic, what was discussed, and what's the plan following that.
Okay, so should we ask Dr. Ficara to help standardize that format across the committees?
I think if anything, it can just be between the administrator and the chairman or chairperson.
Okay. So
Do you
maybe
have the standard form? We have a standard committee reporting template that I can forward to you that you could then look at, customize to what you identify as your needs. And I will email that to you in the morning.
As long as it doesn't limit characters and words, because
No. It's a blank, it's a template.
it's perfect.
that
Template.
would be great.
There are no believe me, board members are not, you can't, 300 characters just doesn't work.
Okay, so it sounds like we have two things, is looking at a standard template and also with Jill's suggestion in terms of after each item, pausing and asking if there are any questions and trying to break it up some. Are we good with that?
I like it.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes. It's good.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so I think we're good. Go on to the next one.
I'm sorry, it's less of like opposing it, but I think there should be kind of what I was saying earlier and what Jill also mentioned is I don't think it needs to be on the action plan, but I think there should be more of an expectation for board members if they see something with minutes that they think should be changed, for them to like actually say something instead of just being quiet and then eventually kind of being like, yeah, like I think the minutes need to change.
Okay, and I don't see why that couldn't be an action item on the plan.
Zach, do you mean when the chair reviews the administrator's draft, or
No,
committee
I
member
think-
or board
I think
member?
it's more of like a general thing. It's more of like after a meeting. So like after a meeting, if a board member thinks something should be changed, I think they should email the chairman and or the administrator. I don't think it can be an action plan, but I just think it's more of kind of like, I just don't see it as an action plan, more of just like, we should try to like speak up more.
Just to clarify, do you mean like a committee member disagrees with how the minutes were portrayed and doesn't feel that's really what happened during the meeting time?
I think that can also be part of it. I think that's also an important thing, just because like if it's in the minutes written as one thing, but in reality it occurred a different way, I think it's important for a member to say something.
Okay.
But the main focus was on if like board members think a specific committee is consistently like lacking in detail or like not get, or like kind of like if we do like when we implement kind of like a more standardized approach, having them kind of say, oh, like I actually just like I noticed in the last one in your last minutes that you didn't have the recommendation part or you didn't have another part, like just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Got it.
Do you receive the minutes of your committee meetings ahead of your board meeting?
Usually.
Yes.
So would it be helpful for board members to reach out to the chair if they either have questions so that the chair is aware and can come prepared to the meeting to respond to questions? Because if one of you has a question about something in the minutes, someone else might as well. And if the chair were aware, they could come prepared to the meeting to be able to respond or to speak with the administrative liaison to the committee, so that the administrative liaison would have that additional information if a board member needs that information, number one. And number two, then if there are corrections or additions that need to be made, the committee chair could make sure that when they gave the report, they were including that, which might eliminate some of that after action, after meeting response.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
And I would tell you, I think you all have a responsibility to read those minutes for each committee prior to the meeting, so that when you come to the meeting, you are prepared, and it would enable your chairs of your committees to be better prepared to give thorough and complete reports if they knew board members thought there was something that they wanted more information. They had a question about a recommendation. That would be helpful to the chairs as well.
That sounds good.
And that's something that as a new board member isn't inherent knowledge. I think new board members need to be encouraged to reminded to read minutes and everything else, because that's not part of the agenda. It's not part of the packet that is sent out in the weekly drive. It's something that if you're not a regular board member, you're not told that, and you need to make sure that you know that, and you need to not be scared to ask the questions if you don't understand something. That's something that I know I've struggled with, and I'm sure that others have as well, where you feel like you should know, so you don't want to ask the question. I feel we need to foster the environment where we ask the question, even if it's something that everyone should know, because someone out in the public doesn't know it either.
You should never feel that you can't ask a question, ever. And we encourage asking questions is micromanaging. It's getting information. So if you, as a board member, you need to have enough information to make an informed decision. And ultimately, you're going to vote on those pieces that are recommended that come out of committee. And so for the committees to be able to provide that information, they have to know that you need it or that you have a question. So it is a responsibility of a board member to ask those questions. And it would just be helpful if you're getting those minutes. I don't know why they're not sent out with the agenda for a meeting, so that they're attached so you would know to read them. Or they just put it in a folder. I don't know, but
they're in a different folder.
But, okay, so on Friday afternoons, the board does get an email from Peter's secretary informing us that, the FFT minutes are in the FFT drive, academic committee minutes. We do get that usually. And so on Fridays we're told the minutes are in the drive. But also I wanted to bring out this point. And this is something we improved upon compared to years ago, because a lot of the committee meetings have documents or attachments that the committee members look through. In the past, they were not shared with everybody else. So a couple of years ago, we asked that the attachments be available after the committee met so that other board members can view those. So I want to also add that we have to be more consistent on where to find those. I think there's a difference. I think a couple of committees, and they're there, but I think some committees have those attachments put in under the agenda file in the drive. And I think there's one committee that has it in the minutes of the drive. So I think we should just make sure that the administrators who run the committees tell the board, so we're all in one place. Barry, do you know if your attachments are in minutes or an agenda? Do you know?
Well, we actually have our own drive that we have a Google Classroom for before the meetings, and then everything from there gets moved to after the meetings.
Yeah, but does it get moved for the drive?
I'm going to look right now. I thought it was moved to the same. I'm going to look now.
I think we should just make sure, and that's easy to do for the administrators, to just make sure that those attachments that were reviewed by committee members after the meeting is finished and before the board meeting, that those attachments are in a similar type drive, either the drive for the agenda of that meeting or the drive for the minutes of that meeting.
whatever you do, it just needs to be consistent across the committee system.
That's
So
exactly what I'm going to say.
exactly where to look to find the information.
Tom, yes.
Gwen, do you think it would be helpful if you could outline the distinction between a board that runs by committee and a board that runs by
Yes.
committee of the whole?
Sure. You operate by committee system, which means you divide up the work. You have a Aries committee, which I assume is finance, facilities, transportation. There's an education committee, and each of those groups is responsible for doing a more in-depth dive around the various administrative initiatives and recommendations that are being made, and then bringing forth that information with how you have what you recommend that the board do in a particular area around a particular topic. In committee of the whole, every single board member participates as though they were in every single committee. So all information for every single area goes to the full board simultaneously, and then you hold discussions around every single one of those topics at a board meeting. And so I think Tom's point may be that, you know, having all of those supportive documents, in some ways, committee systems work when boards trust that the committees are doing their due diligence and doing the work. It's designed to reduce the overall workload of the Board of Education by virtue of each individual committee making recommendations. And board members have to trust that each committee is doing the work that needs to be done, examining issues from all sides and making the best recommendations for the district. That is not to say that board members shouldn't ask, and I would say you should ask questions around why a particular recommendation may be being made. But if that's not the case and board members are revisiting entire committee meetings at your board meetings, then perhaps exploring committee of the whole might be something you'd want to consider.
I think also in the board self-eval, there was mixed responses on that question. So I'm not sure everyone was aware that we worked as board with committees.
Yeah, one of the limitations of committee of the whole is that it's entirely in public. And then you have counter regulations that forbid you from discussing certain things in public. So you end up having discussions with gaps in what you can say in the discussion. So, which is why most districts, one of the reasons most districts go to committee systems.
Historical perspective, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. From a historical perspective, Bridgewater Raritan has tried that to move to committee of the whole. It was done back in the late 90s, and the board went from meeting 2 times a month for 2 hours, you know, an hour and a half, 2-hour meeting, depending upon the topics and what was going on, to 3 meetings a month that were running well after midnight. And the experiment lasted less than 6 months before the board went back to the committee system, because it was very difficult to discuss the items on each agenda in depth and to feel like you really had some sense of it without taking up incredible amounts of time, number one. Number two, there are a lot of areas, as Tom points out, that can be made public in many instances around personnel, around students, so forth. So it became a situation where the board would not necessarily be as direct and as forthcoming as they may be in committee around a particular topic when they were in public. And so you leave the meeting and the superintendent believes that the board was on one page, when in reality, the board was not on that exact same page. And so issues continued to be revisited on a regular basis because there were meetings happening, not full meetings, but things were not being really addressed fully. It was very challenging in a district of Bridgewater size, even in those days, to do committee of the whole. But that is just a personal perspective and a historical perspective to share with you.
So I'm going to step backwards for a moment, Gwen. And I did look at the minutes, and we are in reverse of the other committees. The finance committee meeting. Apologize for that. And we put all our information under the minutes, not under the agenda. So Mr. Stars, you're disappeared for some reason, but if possibly, could we switch to what they're doing? I see the shelf nodding. Okay, we're good.
So can I just say something? I don't necessarily have a problem with the minutes, because if something is said, I usually do ask a question, and then I don't sometimes always think on my feet. So if it's later on in the evening or the next day, I'll pick up the phone and I'll call. Okay, can you please explain? And usually I call the superintendent. I don't know if I've called the board president maybe once or twice, but it's our responsibility as individuals to not just sit here and say, I want it all, but to actually be active and try to get it. And you're right, Steve, that maybe it's better to have some training. And that's why I kind of liked the mentor discussion earlier. I think that might be very helpful. Somebody you can talk to, but it doesn't always have to be the first one. And I think it goes back, the first person or your mentor, but it keeps going back to communication. And so it's about talking, it's about listening, and it's about getting the information, and it is about trust. And I just also want to say we're an hour into this meeting and we're still on the first goal, haven't even gotten into the eval. So you want to just throwing that out there. Just think about it. Maybe now is not the time to complete this, but to think about it and to move on.
Okay, so are we good to move on to the next goal?
Yes.
So can we put up the next slide? Okay, so this is, whoops. Okay, so to develop the greater understanding of the roles and responsibilities of board members. And so I think one of the things actually Gwen covered for us tonight was to give us, the four items that we're really responsible for. So to me, that would be one of the actions, and that we've actually completed that. I know, Gwen, you had also mentioned a training that was just held yesterday, and I think it was recorded, that maybe we should have new board members watch.
Yes, it is recorded and it's available on our website.
Okay. Or maybe we should commit that we all watch it.
Which training is that?
It's the one I was particularly referencing is called the 3 R's, which is roles, relationships, and resources for new board members. But there are a number of webinars that are available that are recorded that you can watch at any time that you would like to, that are available on our website. I don't know that there's one specifically on roles and responsibilities. A lot of the piece from the program I'm referencing was around, what does a reorganization meeting look like? What will you be doing at reorg? You readopt your policy, you readopt your curriculum, you appoint your bank depository, all of those kinds of operational pieces. So some of it is about roles and responsibilities. Some of it's about the resources that NJSBA provides, just in terms of our departments, the county meetings. It's a pretty broad overview, Jackie. It's not really specifically honed down around board members' roles and responsibilities, although it includes some of it.
Okay.
But worthwhile for your new folks, if they haven't seen it, to certainly look at or relatively new board members to watch it would be helpful.
Okay, so maybe that belongs more with the one that we had about onboarding for new board members?
Yes.
Okay. And so what are the thoughts here for this specific goal in terms of what we should be doing? Does anyone have any suggestions? Jean?
Yes, Jackie, I'm thinking maybe we can form a small committee and to take opinion and suggestions and put these all together, because I know that with the different experiences as a board member, right, different people have a different input, different thoughts, and to the experiences that I have are definitely different. So that's what I'm thinking, that if we can have a small team to work on this and put everybody's thoughts or input together, that would be great. So for example, right, because I'm new and like I just don't know a lot of acronyms. So when we are in a meeting, right, just for example, that's CUSAC. Right now I know what it is, but I'm saying like when people, experienced board members are talking about these acronyms, I have no idea what that is. So, you know, like a list of acronyms was definitely something that would be helpful for the new team members. And also, like, you know, the day-to-day operations. So for example, and I'm sure not only the basic foundation roles of as a board member, I think each district has their own culture. And that culture thing can also be input into our own like onboarding material and roles and goals. So that is my thoughts, but I don't know what other members have. But and also including, like, for example, right? We talk about the drive. Where do we get the information? So I remember my first board meeting, I had so much problems just to get to access the data, to see the files. It took me so much time. And I've been trying to reach out to the admin people to help me find the files. But I know, you know, like it takes time, you know what I'm saying? So I think that all these standard operation things, the process, procedure, that should be all in this. Not only the understanding the roles and the responsibilities, but also, you know, some like fundamental thing as a district, you know, or our own district thing. So I think, you know, it's just my thought. I don't know what other people have any thoughts on this.
You know, Gene Lee, when I came on, I used to, I asked for a TLA, 3-letter acronyms, because there's a lot of things that roll off our tongue that nobody knows. And it was interesting. I think there is a list around somewhere that reminds me. It's been a while, but that's a very good exacting of what you're talking about, because there's a lot of, you know, why is CUSAC important? How does curriculum work? And I you know, even the BREA, NJSBA, all those things, and what are those? That's a very important thing, because they can roll off pretty quickly, you know. So.
And this is going to sound like a commercial, so I apologize. But on our website, there is, because I just finished updating it, a booklet, but it's electronic, called Foundations of Board Governance, and it's currently being revised. And there is a list of acronyms and educational organizations, so that any new board member can go there and read through that and get a good sense of a lot of what you're referencing, not the district culture, which of course is specific to Bridgewater, but at least a lot of what you're talking about is available there and gives you a good overview, and it's being redone. So it's something that you could look at. We used to publish those books way back when, and the district used to provide those to brand new board members, and it was really very helpful. The board's role in curriculum, the board's role in finance. We used to have to write them dollars and cents around budgeting and finance. But, you know, everything is electronic now, and they're no longer publishing those, but we put them information available on the website.
Yeah, so I think that that is very good, but like information like this or resources that can be provided in our onboarding material, right? So we know, okay, where we can access to, where is the information that we wanted to get. So that would be, you know, a simple link in our like package that we can access to.
And I think this goes back to the other goal. And, that's something in terms of putting together those materials. Maybe we should have 2 or 3 people that work on that over the next few weeks. And so if we look at that goal for a minute, are there 2 or 3 people that would be interested in putting that together over the next couple of weeks? Because we have 2 new board members coming on, plus we have Jean, who is quite new. So if anyone's interested in helping with that, Jill, is that a hand?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Jean. Anyone else? Is that Steve?
Yep.
Okay, then we've got our 3 people to help work on that. That would be terrific. And I want to go back to this one though. Anne Marie, I think you were the one that raised this, and I'm not sure we're getting at yet what you're looking to have here.
I'm not going to look for something beyond that. I raised this as a goal. I think we need to know that it's about the high level. It's about governance. It's not about commenting on specific individuals or policy or not policy implementation. Our role is the governance level. That's what I meant by the roles and responsibilities of the board. That was a long time ago. We need to know that well.
Okay, and is there something we should put here other than what Gwen has already presented tonight to help direct that that notion?
I don't know. I don't think so. We just need to know
So
what
I think I have something. I think there are 2 issues here. One is at a New Jersey school board level, where this is covered under the first year board member governance training that we get, where this is explained what your roles and responsibilities are. The second issue I think here is how to navigate through our Bridgewater Raritan board procedures, if you will, right? I think there are 2 different issues here that we're dealing with. One can be covered under this governance training that's required, and this committee that we have of 3 people, I think that is for how to navigate through some of the processes that we follow as a board. I think there are 2 different issues here we're talking about. If I'm wrong here, please correct me.
I don't know if you're right or wrong. I don't want to comment on that because I haven't thought about it. But I did want to make a point that you're not going to know everything in the first 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months.
Nope.
You got to remember that this is a continual process.
Exactly. Yep. And that's why I think the school board has this training, right? Every year you have the first year, the new member training, and then you have the second year training. And I think what we're talking about is covered under that. The roles and responsibilities that a board member is supposed to follow, the protocols and the legalities of it. The other issues I think are more local, how we govern ourselves, how we navigate through some of our files, and how we conduct ourselves. So I think there are 2 different issues here. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, is there something you would recommend from an action plan perspective, AJ?
I think what we did here with the 3 people trying to, be mentors, if you will, to the new board members whenever they are elected, I think that is a good idea. But as far as learning the roles and responsibilities, I think that is up to the School Boards Association to teach, because there's a lot of legalese there. So I think what we're doing on one side is good, but the other side, I think, let the school boards cover that under their training that they offer.
Okay, and so Gwen went through some things tonight. She had several slides. Do we feel that the goal is accomplished through that, or do we need to do anything else?
I think it's accomplished, in my opinion.
So I don't think it's accomplished because I think something that even I struggle with is what's the difference between something that's administrative and something that's governance? Like, I disagree with what Anne Marie said, that policy implementation isn't considered like what the board should care about. But if a policy isn't being implemented, I think that's something that the board should care about. And I think there really is a gray area between where is it the board is micromanaging and where is it the
And that is knowing the board's role.
Do we lose Zach?
that are necessary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you froze, Zach.
Yeah,
Oh,
and Zach, I want to be clear. I never said I didn't care that it wasn't implemented. I talked about implementing it in the way it should be implemented.
okay, I'm sorry. So, I still think like there's still that gray area of what's considered board and what's considered administrative. And I think a better understanding of that will help all board members. And I think what the stuff for new board members is like important and good and is very helpful. But I think there's still much more stuff that even older board members should like be learning about. I think certain comments made in the self-evaluation are very troubling to me, and it's very showing of that everyone needs to do more and everyone needs to get a clear understanding of what we can do and what we can't do.
And Zach, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a lot of gray area, and I think we all struggle with that. And so what do we do to help us understand better? And I don't have an answer, but Gwen, maybe you have thoughts, because I do think there's gray, interpretations.
There is gray interpretations, and just to comment on what Zach just said, clearly you are a policymaking body and you should care, which you do obviously, about the development of the policy. The regulations for implementation of the policy are administrative. The creation of the policy itself is board responsibility. And you should get feedback from your administration if the regulations are effective in implementing that policy with fidelity. What did the board intend to have happen? Have the regulations been created? And those regulations for implementation, are they working? And if it's not working, then does the policy need changed? Do the regulations need tweaked? Because you need to be assured that that policy is being followed. It's a roadmap for everything that takes place in your school district. There are lots of those gray areas. I don't think your board, I don't recall in my time that your board has ever done a workshop around what are the roles and responsibilities of a board of education. And understanding that you are really the what folks. You have the big picture, you have the view from the balcony. You shouldn't be down on the dance floor. That's why you have educational leaders and experts, is to be able to lead the dance. You say what you want to see happen, but how is the responsibility of your administration? I don't think you've ever really explored that in any depth to talk about what does that mean for curriculum? What does that mean for finance and facilities? What is the board's role in the creation of the budget? It doesn't mean you should be reading line item after line item. It means you should be setting parameters for the development of the budget. Can your community support a 2% tax cap levy increase? What will we lose if we don't go to that 2% tax cap levy? The board should be looking at the broader picture, right? Not down at a microscopic level. You should be more from a telescopic level, looking down at the district and looking at doing your governance systemically rather than getting into the weeds, which I think is something that has always been a little bit of the culture of Bridgewater Raritan.
But I think we need some help defining because I get totally what you're saying, but when you come to real case situations, I think we struggle.
I think a lot of boards do, but we can help you with that. We can help you with that. We know what's a board responsibility and what's not, and what is micromanagement and what's not.
Okay.
Can't micromanage unless they permit themselves to do that.
So do you have like workshops that might?
We do.
Okay, so maybe
We
we need to add a workshop here that we do something along those lines. And you brought up the regulations also, Gwen, in terms of that's the administration's job to come up with. We've been reviewing and voting on approving of regulations. So is that something wrong that we're doing?
The boards don't typically vote to approve regulations.
Okay, so
But
I think we've
that
been in error
policy-
there.
That policy has been on the Bridgewater Raritan Policy Manual for at least 25 years. It's not really something you should be doing, is what I'm telling you.
Okay.
But it is something that historically has been done in Bridgewater Raritan for at least 25 or more years. That doesn't make it right.
I understand. There are a lot of things that have been around a long time that aren't right.
That's part of the culture that Jean or AJ was met, it's part of the culture of your district.
I just have maybe it's not a quick question, but like, so when we revised the homework policy, part of it was putting specific limits on homework. And all of that was under the regulations. So was it not the board's role to put the specific numbers, or was it still within the board's role to put the specific numbers?
I would tell you that should have been based on an administrative recommendation that those numbers were developed. And I'm assuming that that's the case.
Yeah, it was, but like maybe this like the culture is really embedded in me, and I'm just kind of struggling with this. But like, actually, no, it's okay. Never mind. I think I have.
So here's one. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
My only question is, the way that I read this goal is not just within the board, but without, so that the board needs to understand their roles and responsibilities, but the district of Bridgewater and Raritan also need to understand what board does and does not do. So my question then is, instead of going, and while I encourage everyone to do as much NJSBA training as we can, is there, instead of going to a training session, is there a way to have it a 15-minute bite of presentation at board meetings so that we're getting training, but it's also the public is seeing what the board is supposed to be about?
Steve, that's an excellent idea, because we did that in my old district, and that was so beneficial, where the school boards came in and basically explained it exactly what you just said, right? And that clarified so many things for not only board members, but the community as well, okay? So to that end, Gwen, is this true that the policy that we're supposed to, any policy, just take anything, right, that we look at to sort of adopt for our district, does that policy come down from the top, even above us, meaning from the Board of Education, the Department of Education, I should say, and says, here's a recommendation, I'm just going to throw something out there, HIB, here's the policy that you should, this is a recommendation, and then you can cater it to your needs. And then we can take a look at it and say, all right, we can adopt this as is, or we can add a few items to it, vis-a-vis like the regulations and other things. Is that how it's supposed to work? Because I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Well, there are policies that are mandated, and HIB is probably the worst example in the world, because it comes with a million, only in the sense that it comes with a million specifics. There is not a lot of customization. You have to make sure that you follow all of the timelines. I mean, it's a very detailed, state-driven policy with a lot of requirements, but there are some policies that are not mandated, that are districts' decisions that may implement something that comes down from the Department of Education, but not as a mandate. But HIB, for example, is one of those policies that is very directive. You don't have a lot of opportunity to make district-specific decisions that are different than what the law says you have to do. And that's why those kinds of policies typically get reviewed by your board council to make sure that you're in compliance with all of the dotting your I's, crossing your T's, timelines, notifications, and so forth. But all of the policies that you get from Strauss-Esme are essentially templates that, if they're not state mandated, you can customize to the needs of your district. And I certainly recommend that. That, I think, is what your policy committee has been doing.
Yes.
Well, we've had that when we switched to Strauss-Esme. You know, we didn't just take a blanket, like get rid of all of the old from school boards and just adopt. We went through each one, and some policies we took straight out of their binder, and some we felt, well, you know what, we have a unique situation, so we did like a combo. But as that was like 4 years ago, but as we've been reviewing some of those policies that we adopted 4 years ago, we just did one, for example, in academic committee on attendance. We decided to, it was like the 95% of it go with the Strauss-Esme, just because we know that future boards, it's easier to have any kind of revisions if they go with that standard one. But there were a few things in particular about our high school and attendance and credit that we just added in. So we have the specifics. And I just want to comment, I know you said a lot of boards don't approve, but I look at other minutes. I was just looking just to see, like Montgomery, some minutes. I mean, some boards, maybe if they just use Strauss-Esme, they're more apt to approve the regulations. I think, I don't think it's like,
there's nothing wrong with it, Jill.
No, I know. Okay. But I don't think we're completely like unique.
Oh, you're not unique.
Right.
You're not unique. I didn't mean that. I was trying to make the point that to Jean, that there is a particular culture in your district.
Right.
And that's one of those not quirky, it's other districts do it, but it's not required by law. So you are approving something you're not required to approve. It could come to you as information. Okay, so you're taking action on something that's not required action. That was all.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, so we're back to the workshop, and AJ, I think what you brought up in terms of, can we have it suitcased to our board? So is that possible, Gwen, for this? I know it was possible on the equity workshops. You're on mute.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It is possible for any workshop. It's all part of your dues.
Okay. And I agree that having that the specific discussion related to our board and the, things that have come up would be very beneficial. And I also agree that educating the public is critical. Because I know we get questions a lot of times that we really can't answer. It's not our role to be there. It's really an administrative answer, or it's not the answer of a specific board member. It's the board acting as a whole that would make a decision. So I think it's really important that the public hear as well.
And I will tell you that I think that has been one positive outcome to remote meetings, is that most boards, and I'm sure in Bridgewater as well, you have had greater public attendance at your meetings than you typically did when you used to meet in person. And so even just if only by listening, the public has gained an increased level of understanding and appreciation for the work that boards do and how you operate and how you function, which is something that many members of the public really have not been educated around, just haven't been interested, or they haven't had a reason to attend, and so they don't know. So anytime that you can provide that to the public, I think it's beneficial for the public to understand.
sounds good. And I definitely think it would be a positive. Anything else on this goal? Did anyone have concerns with the first two goals, which Gwen kindly put together action plans for us? I thought they looked good, but others may have additional suggestions or changes.
Change any of it. I have no, it was just meant to be helpful, not to be directive. And you can certainly change, delete any of it you want. I'm not going to be offended. It was just meant to help you get a sense of how to move forward.
It definitely was helpful. Anyone?
Can we go back to the second, I think it was the second goal about the onboarding? I mean, do we want to add a fourth where we're going to get together and compile a list of materials?
I thought that was on here. Isn't that number 2?
That's just
Or
the JSBA material.
Okay, so we can add another one for broader information.
I mean, I'm talking about in district. I already have a list of 5 that I think need to go into a permanent drive so that not only new board members, but we as board members can go back and look and not have to search for example, the board goals or the LRFD or a directory of admin. It's just good to have that.
Yeah, so we can add that on here, so that would be great. One other suggestion, and people may think that I actually think both for the one that you're adding, Steve, and for number 2, right now it says ready by November 2021. We have 2 new board members coming on this January, and we have Jean that is also relatively new. Do we think there's any way to get this ready, like for January? Or is that unrealistic? And that's really going back, I think, to Steve, Jill, and Jean, because you are our committee.
I think it'd be tough given the holidays coming up.
I think
Okay.
by February 1st, probably.
So maybe we should put in February 1st. Is that reasonable?
Sure.
Okay.
I actually just got up for a second and found my original file that Peter and Dr. Hyatt gave me on my onboarding.
Oh,
You're
really?
welcome to share with you. That's right here. So you can actually see board packet on there.
Okay.
So from
The
6 years
paper.
ago. So I'll be more than welcome to share what I got 6 years ago. So hopefully it's more than, it needs to be more, but I just found it by accident.
Okay. Well, any information we have would help get us started. So.
And Steve, if you haven't added it, I would include an organizational chart and a chart of the chain of command for new folks, because I think that's very helpful so that when the public stops a new board member and asks a question, you know where to refer them and who to refer them to that's appropriate.
Yeah, and that'll go hand in hand with the directory too. I mean, as a new board member, you might not know who the supervisor of K through 5 social studies and science is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can we,
Is there anything else on the action plans that we need to discuss?
how about when we're going to review them?
That's actually a great
But
one.
I know it's on their board planning calendar, but when that was put in the calendar, that could have been when we developed goals at a different time of the year. So should we just say, quarterly or every 3 months, or triannually, or what do you suggest for?
I would suggest quarterly, and I would align them with when Tom is going to do an update on the district goals, which generally is done quarterly, so that your public sees you're doing an update on the district goals and the progress toward those. You're also doing an update on the board goals and progress toward those. The new board sits down and you set your dates for your meetings. The new board president, whoever he or she may be, Jackie, whatever, sit and put those right on the calendar for the rest of the year so that you know when they're going to happen. And that helps keep it on track. And it's hard during the pandemic. I mean, I would just give yourselves a break here too, folks. It's doing a lot and it's a tough time. So it doesn't look like it's going to lighten up anytime soon. So just
Yeah.
Thank you.
to each other.
Anything else we may have missed? Okay, so it sounds like we've got an action plan. So that's great.
I think you do.
Any other discussion related to the board self-eval that we want to talk about?
Do we not go over the actual evaluation, or is that just something we read on our own?
Because it contains a lot of comments that are about personnel, I mean, individual and collective board members. They are generally not something that I may comment on. You certainly can do that. And again, you know, it's looking back, but looking forward. So I think you've done great on setting goals and creating action plans to move the board forward. I don't have anything additional to add to that at this point from my perspective.
Does anyone have anything that they feel that they want to bring up? And obviously, I'm assuming we all read through all the comments and how everything was scored.
Yeah, I mean, so I looked through the evaluation, and the thing that concerned me is that it seems like there is a overall view that we have plans in place, but monitoring those plans it hasn't gone so well, or hasn't been as well communicated as it should be. So I just wonder if that's something that we should look into, because that was a relatively low score in the planning part.
I think you're right. I think that, you know, having a quarterly review, like we just discussed, of our own action plans will help that. But I also think our current superintendent has been very good at coming to us with where we are with district goals, which is something we're not used to and appreciate. You can correct me if you disagree. I think we're going in the right direction. And I think a lot of it is our current leadership.
And that's why I suggest putting those dates right on the calendar, right at reorganization, so that regardless, you don't lose track of that. And that helps with the monitoring the progress of the action plans, Steve, to your point specifically. And I think that sometimes those things can get lost just in the press of regular business, which is why it's so important. And, you know, that may be something that you want to consider in terms of understanding the board's role, is looking at that annual calendar that I don't know that all of you have, but I know, Jill, you've seen it. I know, Jackie, you've seen it, which breaks up the board year by months. It's something we generally share with new board members. Again, we just revised that to add a couple of different pieces that have changed in terms of due dates. And I certainly can send that to you as well to share with the board. And I think that, Steve, something that could be added to the file for brand new board members, because I think it helps you to have a sense of the cycle of board governance around an entire year, which makes life a little easier. You know what to expect and when it's coming. And I think that's helpful and helps keep the board on track for that monitoring piece and that oversight piece.
Great, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. And I really appreciate everyone getting the feedback back in time, because I think it's really helpful for all of us to see the comments and, you know, areas that we have for improvement. So that closes out the board retreat section.
Okay. I will take my leave. I just wish all of you a very happy holiday season with your families. Stay well, stay healthy. If there's anything you need, just for Steve and Jean and for your new folks coming in, you are always more than welcome to email me or call me if you have a question. Sometimes I know, to Steve's point, you think you should know it and you don't. You might be uncomfortable asking a colleague. Sometimes you don't want to do that. You're always welcome to email me or call me. I am really very good about getting back to folks in a timely way with an answer. I don't discuss that you called or emailed me with anybody else on the board, with your administrators. So it's completely confidential. If I don't have an answer, I'll put you in touch with someone who can get you an answer. If it's a legal question that I can't respond to or a labor question, but we are a good resource and we are here to help. That's what I spend my days doing, is talking to lovely folks like all of you, which is why I love my job. So I'm happy to help. And again, to Anne Marie and Zach, thank you. Stay well, stay healthy. Enjoy your extra free time. You're not going to know what to do with all that free time when you're not reading all that information. And I wish you all a very happy new year as well. 2020 can't go fast enough for me. And I'm sure for the rest of most of you as well. And I wish you a happy, healthy 2021. So take
And
care.
Gwen, I just
Thank
want
you,
to
Gwen.
say the same to you. We really appreciate it. And you've been
My
a
pleasure.
tremendous help to us. And so thank you very much, and wishing you a happy and healthy new year.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye.
Take care. Okay, we are now up to the public comment section. Individuals, actually I need glasses on. Individual and or groups are invited to present their concerns, comments, and requests to the Board of Education at this time for only matters being acted upon. In accordance, well, actually, I'm sorry, it's for any comments at all, so it's open to anything. In accordance with board policy, members of the public are allotted this opportunity to address the board for a maximum of 5 minutes during this period of the meeting. As this meeting is being conducted remotely as a virtual meeting, public comments can be made via the following options. 1, completing the form online, which will be read at the appropriate point in the meeting. 2, leave a voicemail at 908-725-3976. Or 3, email or letter received by board secretary prior to 6 p.m. indicating the person's desire for email to be read as public comment. So is there any public comment?
There is no public comment. There is no form, or there is no voicemail message.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close that section of the meeting, and we're now up to adjournment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Second, whichever.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, we are now adjourned, and everyone have a very happy and healthy continuation of December. And we'll meet again on December 15th for a regular session of the board.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Good
Be
night.
well.
Good night.